Matt Tinkler, welcome to 7:30.
Thanks, Sarah.
What do we know about the women and children arriving tomorrow?
Well, we know out of this group that there's 9 children involved, and they're innocent children. They didn't decide or have any agency in the choice to be in Syria. They've lived through a war, lived through the trauma of that, and spent a huge part of their lives, or all of their life, in a desert refugee camp in Syria where there are very limited services. And we also know they're Australian citizens and they're on their way home.
What happens to the children in that group if their mothers are arrested straight away tomorrow?
Well, the vast majority of the children and families in the camps in northeast Syria have extensive family networks here in Australia. Those families have been actively lobbying the federal government for 7 years now to bring their loved ones home. So those families are ready and willing to support the reintegration of their loved ones back into Australia and into the Australian way of life.
Will every one of those members, including young children, need to go through a form of de-radicalisation?
Well, the children have undoubtedly been exposed to significant trauma. Every day they spent in those camps, there was harm being caused to them. They haven't had access to appropriate medical care, dental care, education or support. So they are going to need support. But I think we do need to put our faith in the Australian system. We have evidence-based, proven programs that can be applied here to children to de-radicalise them, to support them, to integrate them back into the Aussie way of life.
Now, the government adopted a very different tone, a much harsher tone over this cohort than it did for the group that were repatriated in 2022. What changed?
Well, I think the politics changed, frankly, Sarah. I don't think anything changed in the situation in the camps on the ground or in relation to the cohorts themselves. Again, we're talking about the majority of people in these camps are children. 2/3 of the people we're talking about here are children. So nothing has changed in terms of what they have done or their best interest. It's always been the case that they're Australian citizens. They haven't done anything wrong. They deserve to be brought home.
Now, the states, as we understand it, have the responsibility of running the reintegration of these women and children. What kind of services will they be providing?
Well, a lot of this is about access to the mainstream services in Australia that we would expect. So dental treatment, healthcare, access to schools and education, psychosocial support and counselling. The children and families will get the benefit of that because they're in Australia. And we've seen with previous cohorts that kids are thriving. They're back in school, they're doing well, they're living a normal child's life in Australia. To the extent that additional services like reintegration, de-radicalisation programs are required, well, they exist. We know they exist. We know they work because we've done it before, and they will be applied and welcomed, I'm sure, by the families when they arrive.
Now, just a question about this group compared to the group that were chosen for repatriation when that was government policy back in 2022. This group were not amongst those chosen then. Is that because there are people in this group who hold more extreme views than that earlier group?
I think that's a question for the government and the security agencies. What we know, based on what the head of ASIO said today, is the security threat level in Australia does not change as a result of this group coming home. We've heard from the Australian Federal Police Commissioner that if there is evidence that a crime has been committed, then the women will face charges. The women have known this all along. They have volunteered over the years their full cooperation with law enforcement authorities. They've volunteered to be subject to things like terrorism control orders, if that's what it took to get them and their children home. So I don't think there's any surprises here. We expect that to play out as was outlined by the government and its agencies today.
So how many children remain in the camps in Syria and what happens to them?
Yeah, so there's about 21 people still remaining in the camps, and 14 of those are children. So those children remain reliant on humanitarian agencies like Save the Children to provide support for them, and the Autonomous Administration of North East Syria who are managing the camps. They are very keen to get home. They have passports, so if they are able to get out of the camps and reach a capital like Damascus, then I'm sure they will book flights and they will be coming home soon. And I think this has always been one of the problems in this debate. The debate has focused on whether they should come home, not when they will come home. They're Australian citizens at the end of the day. They were always going to come home. And we've got to focus now on making sure they come home in the right way with their own safety in mind, but also very much the safety of the Australian public too.
Yes, just to come back to that, because there's been a lot of harsh debate over this topic, including today from the opposition. How do you reassure the general community that they should have reasonable levels of trust in the authorities to handle this? They shouldn't necessarily be afraid.
Yeah, and look, I can understand the concern from the Australian public. No parent would take their children to a war zone. I certainly wouldn't make that choice either. But the reality is they're Australian citizens and they are coming home. And what we've heard today is reassurance from the head of ASIO, from the Australian Federal Police, from the Home Affairs Minister that these women and children have been monitored. They are well-known entities in terms of any conduct they may have undertaken. The head of ASIO said he's not worried about their return, but the appropriate checks and balances will be applied. So I think we've got to put our faith in Australia's judicial and law enforcement systems. If we want the women to face justice, the only place that will happen is here in Australia. They're not going to face any form of justice in northeastern Syria right now. So I think that the Australian public should be confident that the right treatments and support is going to be provided here.
Matt Tinkler, thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Thank you.